The store was bright and full of people, but for Maria it felt heavy and cold, like a place where her weakness was on display. She was a single mother, holding her young daughter's hand as she pushed the cart forward. Inside the cart was not much, just some bread, milk, a small pack of fruit, and a box of cereal her little girl had picked with shining eyes. To anyone else it was nothing special, but to Maria, it was everything. It was food for the next few days, hope for one more week. When she reached the counter, her heart beat faster. She pulled out her old wallet, worn and thin. The cashier, a young man with kind eyes, began scanning the items one by one. The numbers on the screen climbed higher with every beep. Maria stared at the total cost as if it were a mountain she could never climb. Her hand shook slightly when she opened her wallet. She had counted the money many times at home. She thought she had enough. But now, standing there, the truth broke her heart. She was short. Not by a lot, but enough that she could not pay for everything her child needed. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, can we take the cereal home?" Her voice was soft, filled with innocent hope. Maria forced a smile, but inside, her chest burned with shame. She could not even give her child something so small. People behind her in line started to shift impatiently. Some crossed their arms, some sighed loudly. Maria felt the weight of their stares. She looked at the screen, again then back at her daughter and finally at the cashier. I can't afford this," she whispered, her voice trembling. She began to pull the cereal box from the bag, then the fruit, her hands moving fast as if removing them would hide her weakness. "I'll return these," she said quickly, her face red with embarrassment. The cashier froze for a moment. He looked at her daughter, then at Maria's tired face. He saw the way her eyes begged for understanding even though she tried to hide it. The store was noisy, but for him the world became silent in that moment. Maria placed the food back on the counter, her hands shaking more now. She felt small, invisible, yet exposed. She wanted to leave, to escape the whispers she imagined from the people behind her. But her daughter still clutched her sleeve, staring at the food with wide, hungry eyes. The cashier slowly scanned the last item and paused. His hand reached into his pocket. Maria didn't notice at first, because she was busy trying to keep her tears from falling. The man's fingers brushed over his own wallet, a decision forming in his mind. Maria looked up at him, expecting to hear the words, "I'll cancel it," or, "You don't have enough." But instead, the young man gave her a gentle smile. The silence stretched for a heartbeat. Around them, people grew restless, but the cashier didn't care. He saw something others did not. He saw a mother fighting against the world just to feed her child. He saw someone who had nothing left, yet still carried herself with dignity. Maria's chest tightened as she clutched the handle of her cart. She whispered again, "I can't afford this. I'm sorry." She was ready to walk away, to leave the food behind, to face her daughter's disappointment. But the cashier's next action would change everything. The line of customers behind Maria grew longer, and the sighs became sharper. A man coughed impatiently, and a woman muttered under her breath about wasting time. But the cashier didn't move faster. He didn't rush. His eyes stayed fixed on Maria and her little girl, who held the cereal box close to her chest as if afraid it might vanish. For a moment, the cashier remembered his own childhood. He had once stood in a store with his mother, watching her count coins with trembling fingers, praying they would be enough. He remembered the look on her face, a mix of fear and shame, when she realized she could not pay. That memory, buried deep for years, came alive again, and in that instant he knew he couldn't let this woman go through the same pain. Maria's hands were already pulling items out of the bag, her face red with embarrassment. She whispered again, "Please cancel. These, I can't pay for them." Her daughter's small eyes followed every movement, and her lip began to tremble as if she might cry. The cashier's hand slipped into his own pocket, and he pulled out his wallet. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't announce anything. To the line. Quietly, with steady fingers, he took out a few bills and slipped them into the register. The machine beeped softly, confirming payment. Maria froze, confused. She looked up at the young man, her eyebrows furrowed. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, as if afraid of the answer. He smiled, not the kind of smile to impress others, but the gentle human smile that carried warmth. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Just take the food home. Your little one needs it." For a second, Maria couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air heavier than anything else she had heard in a long time. She wanted to argue, to tell him she couldn't accept such a gift from a stranger. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came. Tears filled her eyes instead. The girl hugged the cereal box tightly, her face glowing with happiness. "Thank you, mister," she said, her voice clear and innocent. It echoed through the store, silencing even the impatient customers behind them. Some of the people watching softened. A few looked away, ashamed of their earlier impatience. Others simply stared, not understanding why anyone would use their own money for someone else. But the cashier didn't care about their opinions. His focus stayed only on the mother and her child. Maria shook her head slowly. "I don't even know your name," she whispered. The young man chuckled softly as he handed her the receipt. "Names don't matter, just promise me you'll feed your little one first, that's all I want." Her hands trembled as she took the bags. It wasn't just food anymore, it was hope, kindness, dignity returned to her when she had almost lost it. As Maria walked away, holding her daughter's hand tightly, she looked back one last time. The cashier was already helping the next customer, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To him, it was just a simple choice. To Maria, it was a miracle. But what neither of them realized was that someone else had been watching closely. In the far corner of the store, an alien figure with gray skin and sharp golden eyes lowered a small recording device. It had captured everything, the hesitation, the choice, the kindness. The alien's mind raced with confusion. In his world, such acts were seen as weakness, yet what he had witnessed felt like strength of another kind. Maria left the store with food in her bag and a fire in her heart. The cashier stayed at his post, calm and steady, and the alien observer, hidden in the crowd, decided this human needed to be studied more. What started as a quiet act of kindness was about to ripple far, beyond the walls of the small grocery store. The grocery store grew quiet again after Maria left, but in one corner, a figure remained still, hidden in plain sight. To human eyes, he looked like an ordinary customer wearing a hood, but beneath the illusion shimmered pale gray skin and sharp, golden eyes. His name was Kale, an alien observer assigned to watch humans in secret. His mission had been simple: study their weaknesses, record their behavior, and report back to the council. But what he had just witnessed was not weakness. It was something else, something his mind struggled to explain. Kale's people believed only in strength. Their society was built on power, conquest, and domination. To give away something you earned to help someone without gaining advantage was foolishness in their eyes. Yet this young cashier had done exactly that, spending his own money for a woman and child he didn't even know. Kyle replayed the recording on his device, watching the moment again and again. Each time, the cashier's smile seemed stranger, more powerful. "Why?" Kyle whispered under his breath. "Why would he give when nothing is owed?" A human woman nearby glanced at him curiously, thinking he had spoken to himself. Kale quickly looked away and adjusted his hood. He could not reveal himself here, not yet. But his heart beat faster with a strange energy. Something about what he had seen unsettled him. He followed Maria outside the store, careful to keep his distance. The mother carried the bags tightly, her daughter skipping happily beside her with the cereal box hugged to her chest. Kale zoomed his lens to capture their expressions. The mother's eyes were wet but shining. The child's laughter rang like music. They were not afraid, not ashamed anymore. One small act had changed their entire world for the day. Kale frowned. In his culture, warriors earned respect by crushing enemies, by proving dominance. Yet this human had earned respect in silence, with nothing but kindness. Is this their strength? Cale wondered. Not weapons, not armies, but this? He leaned against a street post, deep in thought, his device recording every step of the woman and child. Then his attention returned to the store. The cashier, unaware of being watched, worked quietly at the counter. His movements were simple, ordinary, yet Cale felt something radiating from him. A quiet power his people would never understand. A voice crackled in Cale's earpiece. Report, Observer 3. Have you recorded anything of value? Kyle hesitated. He was trained to deliver facts, not emotions. But how could he explain what he had just seen? How could he tell his commanders that a human's true power might not be violence, but compassion? He pressed the button and spoke carefully. Yes, I have recorded something unexpected. A human displayed generosity to one outside his family unit. It caused emotional transformation in the recipient. I believe it is important. There was silence on the other end, then laughter. Generosity? That is weakness, Observer 3. Record it if you must, but do not mistake it for power. Cale turned off the earpiece, his golden eyes narrowing. Deep inside, he felt the council was wrong. What he had witnessed did not feel like weakness. It felt dangerous, because it spread. Already he had seen the looks on other humans in the store. Shame, surprise, even admiration. One act had touched many hearts at once. That kind of force could not be measured, but it could move entire crowds. The alien stood in the shadows and made a decision. He would continue watching this cashier, this ordinary young man. He needed to understand if this was a single rare act, or if it was a secret woven deep within humanity. Because if kindness was their true weapon, then the galaxy might not be ready for it. Kyle adjusted his hood again and melted into the night, his recorder glowing faintly in his pocket. The game had changed. The hidden eyes had seen, and the truth of humanity's strength was about to spread far beyond Earth. Maria walked home with her daughter, the grocery bags cutting into her hands, but her heart strangely light. She still could not believe what had happened inside that store. The cashier's gentle smile, his quiet words, the way he had paid without hesitation, it replayed in her mind like a dream. For so long she had felt invisible, like the world had forgotten her and her child. But in that single moment someone had seen her. Her daughter skipped beside her, swinging the box of cereal like a prize. Mom, we got it. We really got it, she laughed, her small voice bubbling with joy. Maria smiled, tears stinging her eyes again. Yes, sweetie, she whispered. We got it. Inside their small apartment, Maria placed the food on the table. Her daughter immediately tore open the cereal box, pouring some into a bowl. She ate with wide eyes and a happy grin, the kind only a child could give. Maria sat down quietly, watching her, her chest aching, not from sorrow this time, but from relief. She leaned back in her chair, covering her face with her hands. The weight she had been carrying, fear of failing her child, of not being enough, lifted just a little. It wasn't gone, but now there was light breaking through the cracks. All because of one stranger's kindness. That night, when her daughter fell asleep with a full belly, Maria sat by the window and stared at the city lights. She whispered into the silence, "Thank you, whoever you are. Thank you." But the next morning, she knew she could not just whisper her gratitude into the night. She needed to find the cashier again, to tell him what his act had meant to her. She dressed in her best clothes, though they were simple and worn, and held her daughter's hand as they walked back toward the store. The cashier was there, working as usual, his hands moving over the register as if nothing had changed. But, for Maria, everything had changed. She stood in line, her heart racing until it was her turn. When their eyes met, the young man smiled politely, ready to scan her items. But Maria didn't put anything on the counter. Instead, she placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder and pushed her gently forward. "This is the man I told you about," Maria whispered. Her daughter's eyes lit up. She ran around the counter and hugged the cashier tightly around the waist. "Thank you, mister," she said again, her small voice echoing in the store. The young man froze for a second, startled, then laughed softly, bending down to meet her eyes. "You're welcome," he said, his voice warm. He glanced up at Maria, who stood with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," Maria said, her voice trembling. "You didn't just give us food. You gave me hope. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world." The cashier shook his head, almost embarrassed. "It was nothing," he said. "Anyone would have done it." But Maria knew that wasn't true. She had seen the faces of the people in line. Most would have ignored her, some had even judged her. No, not everyone would have done what he did. That was what made it so powerful. She tried to hand him a small, folded note, money she had saved overnight by skipping her own dinner, but he pushed her hand gently back. "Please," he said softly. "Don't. Use it for your daughter. Feed her. That's all the thanks I need." Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but his eyes were steady, kind, unshaken. Finally, she nodded, holding her daughter's hand again. "Then at least know this," she said, her voice stronger now. "I will never forget you, and I will tell others what you did. I want the world to know that kindness still lives." The cashier only smiled as if her words were more than enough. What none of them noticed was Cale, the alien observer, standing near the bread aisle. His golden eyes studied the scene, recording every word, every tear, every smile. For him, the gratitude was even stranger than the act itself. The way humans carried kindness like a fire and passed it from one to another. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. And as Maria left the store that day, her daughter skipping once again, Kyle whispered to himself, "This is not weakness, this is power." Far above the city, hidden behind the thick clouds, a sleek observation ship floated in silence. Inside, Kyle uploaded the recording he had captured in the grocery store. The council would expect a report, but what he had to show them was not a typical display of human aggression or competition. It was something softer, stranger, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The holoscreen flickered, and soon the stern faces of other alien observers appeared. Each one wore the same expression, cold, proud, and unyielding. They were warriors from a species that valued strength above all else. To them, survival meant conquest, and mercy was weakness. Cale bowed his head slightly in respect before playing the recording. On the screen, they saw the moment when the human cashier slipped money from his own wallet to pay for Maria's groceries. They heard the child's innocent voice thanking him, saw the mother's tears of relief and the smile that passed between strangers. When the recording ended, the chamber was silent for a moment. Then, one of the elders scoffed loudly. "Pathetic," he growled. "This is the kind of weakness that ensures their species will always remain prey. They waste their resources on the unworthy." Another voice joined in, sharper and colder. "Compassion is a poison. It weakens armies, divides warriors. If humans live this way, they will destroy themselves long before we need to lift a weapon." But not everyone agreed. A younger observer leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing. "You are wrong. Did you not see the effect? That woman left with her spirit restored, the child left with hope. And even the bystanders who mocked her were changed. One act spread through many hearts at once. That is not weakness. That is influence." The debate grew heated. Some shouted that kindness meant vulnerability, that an army built on mercy could never win wars. Others argued that the human's strength came not from their weapons but from their ability to bind one another together with invisible threads of trust and care. Kyle stood silently, letting them argue. Inside his chest, his own heart was unsettled. He remembered the look on Maria's face, the way her daughter hugged the cashier, the way even the impatient customers grew quiet. He had felt something stir in him, something his people had long forgotten. Finally, the eldest among them raised a hand, silencing the chamber. His voice was deep, commanding. Enough. Observer 3, what is your judgment? Do you see weakness, or do you see strength? Cale's golden eyes glowed faintly as he lifted his head. His voice was calm, but heavy with certainty. I see danger. Not the kind that comes from fleets or weapons, but the kind that spreads without being seen. Their kindness is not weakness. It is a weapon we do not understand. It binds them together. It inspires them. And it terrifies me more than any human gun. The chamber fell silent again. Some sneered, others whispered. The elder leaned back, in his seat thoughtful. Danger, from kindness? You speak of myths, Observer 3. Our people crushed such ideas centuries ago. Mercy cannot win battles. Perhaps not a single battle, Kyle replied. But it can win hearts. And if enough hearts are won, entire worlds will follow. The council ended the transmission soon after, divided and restless. Some dismissed Kale as a fool. Others began to wonder if there was truth in his words. Alone on his ship, Kale replayed the recording one last time. The simple act of a cashier helping a struggling mother. Something so small, yet it echoed louder than any explosion. He whispered to himself, if this is what humans truly are, then the galaxy has underestimated them. Outside his window, the stars shimmered cold and distant. For Kale, they no longer looked the same. The next morning, Maria woke to the sound of her daughter humming softly at the table. The cereal box sat proudly in front of her, half empty already, a treasure from yesterday's miracle. Maria poured herself a small cup of tea, her mind still heavy with the memory of the cashier's kindness. She had planned to say thank you again, but gratitude alone didn't feel enough. Something inside her told her that his act should not be forgotten, not hidden. She decided to tell her neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, an older woman who often stopped by to check on her. As Maria shared the story, her voice trembled with emotion, but her eyes glowed with hope. Mrs. Lopez listened quietly, nodding. Then, to Maria's surprise, the older woman whispered, "You must share this, child. People need to hear that kindness still exists. Too many have lost faith in it." By afternoon, the story had spread through the neighborhood. A mechanic down the street heard about it and quietly repaired a single mother's car without charging her. A baker, who had been holding back loaves for profit, left bread on doorsteps for those in need. One act had lit a spark, and now it was catching fire, moving from person to person like an unseen current. Kyle, watching from the shadows of the city, recorded it all. His golden eyes widened as he saw the pattern form. Humans were not only kind, they multiplied kindness. A single deed did not end with one person. It echoed, rippled, and grew. For his people, strength stopped at the warrior who held it. But for humans, strength flowed, spreading into everyone it touched. In the market square, Kale overheard two men arguing. One said, "That cashier is a fool. He'll starve himself if he keeps paying for others." The other shook his head and replied, "No, he showed us what we forgot. Maybe it's time we start helping each other too." Kale stepped back, shocked. These humans were not only remembering, they were changing. The power of one act had shifted the hearts of many. He sent another recording to the council, showing the ripple effect. But again, most of them laughed. A few neighbors handing out bread. "That is not strength," one elder said. "It is sentiment. It will fade." But Kale wasn't sure. He could feel it in his bones. This was not fading. It was growing. Meanwhile, Maria decided to return to the store once more. She stood in line with her daughter, not to buy food this time, but to watch the cashier. She noticed how others looked at him now. Some with curiosity, some with quiet respect. The act had marked him, made him more than just a worker behind a counter. People began greeting him with warmer smiles, some even offering him small tokens of appreciation. The young man shrugged off the attention, his humble nature unchanged. To him it had been a simple choice, nothing worth all this fuss. But Maria knew better. She could feel it in the way her neighbors spoke, in the way her daughter now looked at the world with brighter eyes. One act had planted seeds of hope across the community. Kyle recorded Maria's words when she whispered to another mother outside the store. "He gave me more than food. He gave me back my dignity." That night, as Kyle returned to his ship, he stared at the stars again. He spoke softly into his recorder. "Humans carry a weapon we do not understand. They do not fight alone. They fight with invisible bonds, with trust, with compassion. This ripple will not stop here. It will spread until even the strongest armies tremble before it." Far away, the council ignored his warning. But on Earth, the ripple had already begun. Cale could not sleep. The recording of the cashier's small act of kindness looped in his mind again and again. He had spent years observing humans, but none of them had disturbed his thoughts the way this young man had. The council dismissed it as weakness, but Cale could not accept that answer anymore. Something inside him whispered that he was standing at the edge of a truth his people had long ignored. But doubt still gnawed at him. Perhaps this cashier was only an exception, a rare spark in an otherwise ordinary species. If that was true, then Cale's worries were nothing but foolish dreams. He needed proof, clear and undeniable proof that the human's kindness was not chance, but something deeper. So he devised a test. Late one evening, Cale disguised himself in human form and stepped into the dim streets near the grocery store. He carried a heavy crate filled with metal parts from the junkyard, far too heavy for an ordinary person to lift alone. He chose a narrow alley where shadows stretched long and the sound of footsteps echoed sharply. Then he waited, crouching beneath the weight, groaning as though injured. It wasn't long before the cashier appeared. His shift had ended, and he walked home alone, his hands in his pockets, shoulders tired from the long day. Cale held his breath, unsure of what would happen. Most humans, when faced with inconvenience or danger, looked away. Would this young man do the same? As soon as the cashier turned into the alley, he froze. His eyes widened at the sight of Cale, bent under the weight of the crate, his face twisted in pain. Without hesitation, the cashier ran forward. "Hey, hold on," he shouted. He dropped his bag on the ground and crouched beside Cale. "Don't move, I'll help you." Before Cale could react, the human pushed his arms under the crate and heaved. His muscles strained, his breath came hard, but he didn't stop. Bit by bit, he lifted the impossible weight off Cale's body and set it aside with a loud thud. "You okay?" the cashier asked, panting, sweat shining on his brow. He reached out a hand to help Kyle stand. Kyle stared at him, stunned. There had been no pause, no suspicion, no question of reward. The human had acted without thought, as though helping was as natural as breathing. It wasn't weakness, it was instinct. "Yes, I think so," Cale muttered, keeping his disguise intact. He tried to hide the tremor in his voice. "You didn't have to do that, it was dangerous." The cashier shook his head. "Didn't matter, you needed help, that's all I saw." Kyle felt his chest tighten, not with fear but with something unfamiliar, something almost painful. He had expected hesitation, maybe even fear. But what he found was courage born not of pride but of compassion. As the cashier dusted off his hands and picked up his bag, he smiled faintly. "Be careful carrying stuff like that next time," he said. "Not everyone's around to help." Then he walked away, disappearing into the night. Cale remained frozen in the alley, the weight of the test pressing heavier on him than the crate ever had. He whispered to himself, "It wasn't luck, it wasn't chance. This is who they are." Later, when he sent the recording to the council, they argued again. Some still scoffed, others grew uneasy. But Cale no longer doubted. The human's instinct to help, even at risk to himself, was no weakness. It was the strongest weapon Cale had ever seen. And for the first time in his long career as an observer, Cale felt fear, not of humans, guns, or ships, but of their hearts.